I have with me Imesh, Liyanage, and we have been continuing to discuss various aspects as to why it is important and what elements come into attack surface management. And today we are going to talk two specific things, very specially, because on one aspect, people keep talking about vulnerability management, but then there is also a term which is actually coming to surface, threat vulnerability intelligence. But predominantly, we talk about threat intelligence. So I'm going to invite Imesh to shed some light or his appreciation to these two concepts in a very brief way, right? We won't dwell deep into the subject, but maybe we will have that conversation on a separate date. But today, you just set the tone as to what, is it the same thing? Or how, if it is not, what's the difference? Imesh?
Sure, Sujit. So in terms of the difference between attack surface management and threat intelligence and vulnerability intelligence and how it links to attack surface management, is that threat intelligence is usually raw data that doesn't have context to your organization. Usually, there might be curated threat feeds that do. But what it would say is, we're seeing these IOCs, we're seeing this campaign happening in this region, or we have intelligence of someone attacking this particular organization or this industry, or this APT group doing this or leveraging this tool. Vulnerability intelligence is a little bit more filtered, and what it does is it sort of combines threats to a CV, so that when you look at a CV, you can answer questions like, is this weaponized? Meaning, is there an exploit available for this? Is it being used in the recent past? Is it trending? Is it associated with APT groups? Does APT group so-and-so target this vulnerability? Is that what their usual behavior is? Also, does this ransomware family target it? Does this particular malware family target the CV? And we also consider aspects like, is it being exploited? Do we predict that it's going to be exploited soon, even though it's not being exploited at the moment? And then the reason why we do this is that threat intelligence might not be always accessible to all organizations, just because you need to have the expertise and multiple threat feeds to be able to have a good threat intelligence program. Whereas with vulnerability management, you don't need to be constantly monitoring it, because as long as you know what vulnerabilities are in your environment, you're getting the intelligence related to those specific vulnerabilities. So rather than saying, this APT group is targeting Sri Lanka or India, we can say this APT group is targeting this vulnerability. This vulnerability is in your environment, and this is the APT group that you have modeled and is targeting people in your industry. So it's a lot more actionable for organizations, even if they don't have a big, threat intel monitoring team or a SOC team to do all of this. Which is, I think, the fundamental difference between threat intelligence and vulnerability intelligence. But of course, definitions vary depending on vendor, so there might be a little bit of gray area overlap here and there.
So, Imesh, what I'm hearing from you is, while these are two different subjects, one focuses on vulnerabilities existing, inherent to an asset. The other one is a threat which is external to the asset, which tends to target vulnerabilities which are inherent or exist in the assets. So what you're saying is, the trend, what you're seeing is that today, knowing the vulnerabilities is not enough, but the vulnerability intelligence should clearly articulate how serious that vulnerability is, or how quickly should the organization remediate those vulnerabilities. Because the biggest challenge I see for the organization is when you are transitioning or when you're through a transformation, the first thing what they do is lift and shift. Whatever applications which are there in their environment, maybe in a physical data center, they just lift it, shift it to the cloud, and it operates as is. But they are not cloud native. They're not developed for a cloud environment. But if they are to fix one vulnerability, that means in some cases, or sometimes even in most cases, they may have to rehash the whole application, which means a couple of months or years of effort which is going to go in, man months or man year effort. So sometimes that's an unforeseen cost for the organization. So while they have to manage the risk, they have to treat the risk, it is important for them to also understand the seriousness or the priority which they need to assign to that vulnerability. Anything you want to add to what I said, Imesh?
Yeah, I mean, the transformation use case is one, but even just in general, when you look at how large organizations are, when you go and you do a vulnerability scan, even in a medium-sized organization, you end up with thousands of vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And then you might have 3 people in that organization who are responsible for patching all of this. They would get overwhelmed very easily, and because there's a lot of noise. Because even if you go by just CVSS scores, right? In the NVD, you look at all the vulnerabilities, about 30% are high-end critical. So even if you take similar proportions, you're still looking at 3,000 vulnerabilities. But let's say instead of saying go and fix anything that's a 7 or above in terms of CVSS, what if you told them go fix everything that's linked to ransomware first? That might be a list of, according to our research, there's only about less than 400 vulnerabilities of the 280,000 something in the NVD that ransomware actually targets. So you get rid of those, you're reducing your ransomware risk. Then if there's an APT group you're worried about, check which vulnerabilities they're targeting. That's why vulnerability intelligence comes. Go and fix those. So that gives you more impact, because we've seen organizations where people are incentivized just to fix as many vulnerabilities as they can. So they might just go and patch, minor vulnerabilities, just because it's the easiest thing to patch, and they can deploy it remotely and patch 1,000 endpoints at once. Whereas the important one, which might be a moderate level severity but represents the largest risk because it's a publicly exposed asset, and it's been actively targeted by multiple APT groups. So that's where you need to sort of add context using vulnerability intelligence, and combine that with attack surface management. So if it's something external, it should be prioritized as well. And that's how you sort of build a more effective and more impactful vulnerability management strategy rather than just going after numbers.
In essence, what we are saying is that if we need to have a robust risk management framework, these are essential components which should exist as part of that framework. Am I right to say that?
Exactly.
So any gaps which you identify or any vulnerabilities you identify which you are not able to treat them in the shortest possible time, then that should appear in your risk dashboard, which should then be continuously reviewed, monitored, and understand how it is going to have an impact in the on the organization. Am I right to assume that?
Yeah, and also just a slight nuance there is not just how fast you fix it, but are you fixing the right things at the right time? Like, there's no point fixing, going after every 0 day just because it's in the papers. Unless there's an actual expert available, is there someone actually targeting this? If there isn't, you can concentrate on something that might not be, getting a lot of press at the moment. But much more dangerous because people are still attacking it. Like we see older vulnerabilities still being attacked, specifically because people are worrying about new vulnerabilities and forgetting about old ones. So that's where that intelligence comes in.
Yeah. So that intelligence is very important for us to understand where do we focus our effort or where do we channel our available resources. Knowing what is at stake in itself is the first step for effective risk management, right? So,
Exactly.
Imesh, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. So, viewers, I think this session brought out a lot of important aspects which you need to go back and review in your own environment, whether these things are actually happening. If not, you need to figure out as to how you would address the vulnerability intelligence, which would help you understand how threat actors exploit these vulnerabilities so that you can prioritize in your risk treatment strategies. So don't go away. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow where we're going to be talking about the best practices in adoption of ASM. So to have that conversation, I'm going to invite Imesh Liyanage again and see you tomorrow. In the meantime, thank you
Thanks,
so
Viral.
much, Imesh.